That does not mean everything returns to normal for these business owners. Timothy Vogus is a business professor at Vanderbilt. He joins me on the phone this morning. Timothy, thank you so much for the time. Let's talk about the impact that the new health and social distancing guidelines are having on business.
Hi, AJ. Thanks for having me. Well, I think one of the big impacts is it's still difficult out there, especially for small businesses, because they tend to operate on pretty thin margins. So even the kind of partial reopenings that we're seeing, it might not be enough. So we're still seeing some business closures and things like that. And especially with kind of uncertainty about whether there might be a second wave, so businesses might be a little bit nervous about that possibility.
You know, it's so true because, just last week we actually had a list of restaurants that had closed because of the COVID-19 pandemic, that playing a huge role. Are small businesses the ones that are going to be the most impacted by COVID-19? Is that what you're seeing?
I think so, because they lack this kind of slack, and they're also the ones that are most affected by shifts in demand, right? Okay. So right now we're experiencing what can be termed a demand shock. And that's really a psychological kind of effect. So people aren't shopping as much, going out as much because they're afraid of contracting the virus. But also for themselves, they're also worried about their own employment uncertainty. Will I have a job to go back to, or do I have a job? And if I have one, how long will I have it for? Which tends to make people a little bit more cautious, more likely to hold on to their kind of financial reserves and resources they spend less.
Gyms and salons, we know that they can reopen today in Nashville. How do you expect these changes to impact those specific types of businesses?
Yeah, so I think people will be, I think it might be a slow startup for those businesses because it's really close contact business. So these kind of psychological effects about contracting the virus and maybe seeing gyms as kind of more discretionary activity, even though people want to, are probably especially eager to get out, they might be a little bit uncertain about whether they can afford that additional bit for, seeing a personal trainer, going to the gym, things like that. So I think it's still a little bit of a rocky road ahead.
I'll tell you what, it was interesting because this morning we had our reporter, Justin McFarland, who was out at one of the gyms this morning, and there was a line of people out the door waiting to get in. So you're right, it's really going to be a case-by-case basis. Final question for you. What rights do business owners have to protect their own employees?
Have pretty broad discretion to kind of to implement and enforce their own policies. And I think those policies are pretty important because we want people to feel comfortable and safe, both the employees and the customers going into these places of business. That's what's going to really return everything to a more normal state, when people can go out, feel safe, feel like they can do their normal kinds of activities.
As you mentioned, the psychological impact, you're absolutely right. Timothy Vogus, business professor at Vanderbilt, we appreciate the time and your insight as businesses continue to reopen. Well, we know travel is down this Memorial Day.